Okay, it's 11:30 now. Good morning and welcome all of you. And to respect the time of people who joined on time, we start the meeting, and others, anybody else joining can keep joining. I'll start with the disclaimer. This meeting is not meant to be any stock recommendation or is not any encouraging you to buy a particular stock or even to invest in stock market. It is meant as a learning process to help those who are interested to understand one of the methods of stock investment. I need to say that because there's no single way or there is only one method which is right and all others are wrong. That is not the way. Many people have different ways of selecting and none of them may be wrong. So just what I think is a decent way considering our market conditions, I'll do that. I'll share the screen. You can see the screen now.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. So this meeting, as the name suggests, is intent is to have a discussion on the stock selection. But in that also, just want to be sure that every activity has certain, say, objective. So when you're selecting stock also, you need to see what is the objective of why you're doing that. Let me just clarify with on what factors should you be looking at. Stock selection is the subsequent step after or you have identified your say financial objectives. Typical, I won't go into detail in that because that will be an entire topic in itself, but at a high level, when you consult a financial planner for you or you make your own financial planning, you consider these factors. You list out your objectives. Why, I mean, what is it you're trying to achieve through this investment? It could be that you want to save and get certain returns for a children's education, or it could be for a retirement fund, or to create wealth, or to be able to retire at certain age. So defining these objectives will be important because what kind of stock you need to select, that will then get identified. Instead of straight away jumping into how to go about stock selection, we'll go through objectives. Then your requirements also linked to those objectives. It needs to be with timelines. When you say you need certain funds for children education, it's not an open-ended item. You probably need in 2027 or 2034, whatever the timelines are there. Understanding that and noting them down, that will be important. So then you know what percentage of your assets you have earmarked for next 20 years and what you need to take out in 5 years, what you will require in 10 years, like that. Then post that, you need to have an investment plan. One is, it's not always that you have X amount now and only that money you're investing. You have an income, then probably you are looking to invest some more each month or periodically or quarterly or annually whenever your savings come up. So that part, then whatever the final plan you make, the essential and important part will be the discipline in maintaining and following your financial planning. Only then it will lead to. And in financial planning, it is not just about stocks. In fact, 90% of Indian stocks are not even in the say asset classes that they own or invest in. Typically, almost everybody looks at real estate, gold, debt in some form. When I say debt, you have a fixed deposit or some money in bank, some liquid cash, that kind of thing. And nowadays, the more wealthy or high net worth individuals are also looking at not risking their whole, say, money into Indian economy. So they want to own assets in foreign countries, foreign currency. So they want certain assets in dollars or pound, so that for some reason, if the Indian currency goes down or economy, they have hedged that. And Also, RBI has permitted that, and it will become much easier to invest either in bonds or in stocks in foreign companies. So a lot of people are looking at that also. Then there are others which may be coming from time to time, like recently cryptocurrencies and NFTs. These have become say popular or fad, or at least a lot of people are considering that. So like that, different asset classes. The financial planning will be a holistic plan of mixing all these asset classes. That doesn't mean that every time you have some money you need to start distributing between all that. You need to say realize a certain way, say when this group, like most people are say government employees, you have a assured pension income for rest of your life, then probably you don't need to plan from a certain income to survive or for your monthly expenses, because that is coming from a different source. And similarly, most people would have already invested in real estate over a period of time. At least you bought a house or something, that is real estate. So it's giving as a asset class, you own that. And probably in a family, you have some gold or like that. So then it doesn't mean that you now have to look at 10 lakh or 20 lakh or 50 lakh investment. A typical financial analyst will start trying to distribute between you do this, you do this, you do this, and so much of say further distribution of that you don't make any significant investment in any asset class. So if you understand that you already have real estate substantial amount, and you have say liquidity that is required, and you have a retirement income that is assured, then you can look at probably say how to grow the money that you have. I mean, all these years you work for earning the money. Now you need to find ways how money can work for you. Then so then you look for a better returns, or not an average return. Because if you're happy with this bank fixed deposit kind of thing, then we don't need this discussion. We are not even looking at equity. And anything that offers or there is a possibility of a higher return invariably comes with a element of risk, higher risk compared to having a fixed deposit. If a new private bank is offering a little higher interest rate on say fixed deposit, I also understand that there is a higher risk in that compared to putting your money in state bank. So it is, you balance those things and take this decision. So without wasting more money onto that discussion of asset allocation and overall financial planning, I'll come straight to the stock selection part of it. Let's assume that you have decided to make some investment into equity markets. Then the next question comes, where do you want to invest that? So there are typically two approaches to investment in equity markets. One is called a top-down approach, and one is a bottoms-up approach. So in a top-down approach, even if you take some fund, be it a Morgan Stanley or a Goldman Sachs or anybody, or a high net worth individual anywhere in the world, even Indian today have the luxury and leverage to do that. You can invest anywhere. Unlike old times, you don't need to invest only in Indian market. You look at the overall world economy, how does it look? If it is looking risky, or the overall economy is expected to contract over next for a few years for some reason, then you probably don't want to go into equities. That then they look at geopolitical risk, which area there is a say war-like situation, or too many of confusing signals, too many risks. For example, Taiwan may look risky now with China say going over their airspace almost every day. So a conflict can break out anytime. Then war is the last thing that equity invest or equity markets look at. It tanks badly. So that becomes a risk. So they may want, those who are investing X amount may cut down on the portfolio and investments into Taiwan. So stability is important. Then they look at other economic indicators. Is the GDP picking up, and does it look like over next few years it will go up or it will go down? Today, somebody looking at China may think that, okay, last 20 years they had a phenomenal growth. That is where every fund and all developed countries, they were investing big time in China. But today they may see that over next 10, 15, 20 years, growth won't be too much there, and there may even be contraction. So they'll cut down on the allocation to Chinese market and may increase it to Indian market, because it looks like the big among the larger economies, it's the fastest growing, and it's likely to stay like that for over next 15, 20 years. So then, okay, let's increase I said to in India, like that the decision goes. If you see, we are now going top down. We are looking at world economy. Within that, which countries to look at. Within countries, when you're looking at, you look at all these factors: demographics, economy, GDP growth, political stability, because that has an impact on economy and policies. Then tax and policy predictability. It's not necessary that they're looking for which country has the lowest taxes. They would rather prefer a economy where taxes and policy are predictable. If governments, every new government or every new minister keep changing this thing, then it is difficult for people to plan their finances, for businesses to plan finances. So if Tesla has to make their investment or a new plan, they will be looking at all these factors I mentioned. So they know that, okay, here, if they know tax is X amount, be it nowadays corporate tax highest slab is 25%. So then they'll factor it into their calculation. After some time, a new minister comes and increases it to 35%, their whole calculation and idea behind investment goes for a upside down. So then they don't want to get into that kind of unpredictable markets. So these things you take and what are the investment opportunities? Like they may be, everything may look good, but say if the stock market is not mature or very nascent, the market capitalization of the market is very low, then they don't have an opportunity to get in there. Like that, then within that having identified, okay, now we've identified Indian market, let's go in. It looks fantastic. There are good structural reforms happening. We have a stable political environment, and then GDP is going. We have a demographic side, one of the youngest populations, and likely to have like this for over next 20-25 years. All signals good, so let's invest in Indian market. Having considered, then we look at, we need to then, there is nothing like a market. Of course, you can put into index or this kind of thing, but you need to identify which stock to put into. So before getting to that stock, we identify which sectors are likely to do well. In the last video also, we discussed that there are some sunrise sectors, something like which are coming up, like renewable energy. It wasn't there 5 years back or 10 years back. An electric vehicle, 10 years back, there is no company which is doing anything in electric vehicle. So, but now it is picking up around us. And for something which is just about starting and we expect it to grow very big, that gives a growth opportunity compared to say cement or a steel, because they have been there for a long period of time. Infrastructure companies have been there. So they will also grow with the growing economy, but the certain sectors will outperform. And say in this, one of the sectors we identified is also that, say, financial sector. Modi is talking about $5 trillion economy, and yeah, it may be 2 years later or earlier, but invariably nobody argues with the fact that India is going to be a $5 trillion economy. Now we are around 3 trillion. And then from there, probably 10 years down the line will be a $10 trillion economy. If that is to happen, whichever other sectors contribute and how much percentage they'll contribute, one sector that has to grow, without that it can't happen, is the financial sector. That is, to have an economy of $10 trillion or a $5 trillion, you need a few hundred very large banks. So we assume that we've identified as an opportunity a particular sector. Now, once you have identified a sector, then you have to pick a stock within that. It's not that you pick any stock in that sector and it perform well. In a absolutely growing sector or a sunrise sector, maybe that more stocks will perform well, and very few percentage would be doing unwell. I mean, that's like if somebody is into electric vehicle, almost all of them may do better than where they are now, because everybody is starting from almost zero. But within that, some will become superstars and future top companies. They will go into index and all. So right picking will help you pick the right horses. And so you don't want to get into a situation where you just invested because you think, okay, share market बढ़ रहा है उसमें डालना है. तो कौन सा है? You listen to a tip on कहीं WhatsApp में forward आ गया या किसी YouTube वीडियो आपने देखा कि वो फलाना इकट्ठा कर रहा है, वो ये बहुत भागने वाला है. So you shouldn't get into that without understanding what you are buying and why you are buying. Why is more important. So some of the things that you look at commonly in whichever sector, I deliberately didn't try to pick theoretical elements and put into. I mean, if you want to look at theoretical elements of what factors to look at and consider, you can do. I mean, all of you have access to internet. You do a Google search, then all these formulas will come. And Peter Lynch or Warren Buffett or what Jhunjhunwala they say, what they do, what does Motilal Oswal or Ramdev Agarwal will say. All of that can be read. I tried to make it more like a common sense kind of thing, and then what is easy for you to look at and do that. You're investing into business, so financials, of course, you need to understand and study that before putting into. Then management is very important. Within that also, in some sectors, it is much more important than other sectors. Then longevity means how long is this going demand or growth going to be there. Some may be temporary phenomenon. For example, you take a, let's say, RT-PCR test or a hand sanitizer. Suddenly there is a huge boom when pandemic came in. So last February, March, so whichever companies were early to start that, they get a big boost. But is it sustainable? Will they have that kind of growth over next 5 years? Very, very unlikely. Over 10 years, definitely not. So they lack longevity. So you don't make long-term investment in that. If you're a trader and looking for a short-term opportunities, you may pick something on that, but you also know that this is not my long-term investment bet. I'm making a trying to chance per dance kind of thing, making a quick buck on passing opportunity. Then you look at a value. What is the value? Value don't look at for you immediately. What is that company or business bringing value to the, let's say, customers, its customers, and the overall economy and the larger society at large. So anyone which is doing that part, it doesn't have to be like a social service kind of thing. It is like, for example, if Tesla is making electric vehicles, it is a huge social service to the humankind because the planet is at risk because of climate change. So, and the fuel guzzling cars, if the people shift to electric cars, it is saving the planet. So then obviously it's no wonder that a Tesla, becomes one of the largest market capitalization, and Tesla, Elon Musk becomes the richest human being on the planet because the value that they bring. Similarly, when a Google or a Facebook, a Google gives a like a ready answers to anything that you're searching for. Whatever you're searching for, you have it available there. It made it so much easy, added so much value to life. Google has become like a verb. So you don't say search for something, Google it. So when you bring that kind of value, it becomes a $1 trillion or a few $1 trillion kind of business. Similarly, within India also, some stocks make more impact and they invariably will have growth. If Jio is made, say, data availability to everyone at a very affordable price, invariably that stock price increases. Last year during lockdown, every 2 weeks you are hearing a $1 billion investment coming into Jio platforms. That is the telecom wing of or the e-commerce wing of within Reliance industry. That's because similarly the stocks like Adani Green, which are into renewable energy, as they were increasing their renewable energy production, then the stock prices have zoomed. We have seen say 8x, 10x kind of growth in within a period of months. That is identifying the right and the companies adding value to the society, to the customers. Then of course there is a price. I mean, you need to pick something at a right price. Nothing is say can be bought at any price. Everything got a price. Beyond that, it's not a value for money, or you will be making loss. Even though it is a fantastic business, business will grow, but you bought it too high, then you are more likely to make loss, or will make a very small, limited kind of return. So you also need to see which is at the beginning of that cycle. And just for the sake of example, somebody is mentioning the slides seem to have gone okay. You can see the slide or the screen, right?
Yeah, now it's visible. Sorry, I probably Zoom challenged.
Okay, no problem. Okay. For a phase of example, I said in the top-down approach. In fact, I didn't mention the bottoms approach. Bottoms approach is nothing. The same points which is seen as a top-down approach go from bottom to top. That is, you identify, look at stock, study each stock in detail, and see whether it is investable or not. After you shortlisted the stock, then see is that stock in the right sector that you should be investing in, and then going up like that. So now coming to, for the sake of example, I said if the economy has to grow, the financial sector has to grow. So within financial sector, for sake of example, different points you can look at. It can be should we invest in NBFC or a bank? Within bank, should you invest in a government bank or a private bank? Like that. And then within private bank, so why I come to bank is regulated finance companies are likely to do better, and they have done. There are few examples like exceptions like a Bajaj Finance. We have given exceptional returns, but relatively more banks would be giving that kind of return. So let's assume we choose banks instead of an NBFC to park our money. We find an exceptional NBFC, you can look at that. Then within banks, okay, government banks and private banks. Any government bank that you take, I would say they are bankrupt 10 times over. It is just that because we have given a, let's say, blank check to the government as a taxpayer. So government's taxes fund that bank and refinancing that bank. They are run badly. So they may be a temporary price opportunities that it's totally undervalued, and then there some places, some banks may be there may be improvement, but it won't be worth taking. If you've seen, like SBI has been there from very beginning. They have the kind of network which no private sector bank can match. And then you have very large bank like a PNB and Bank of Baroda, a whole lot of them and regional bank. But at one point, HDFC Bank alone, that market capitalization, that is the value of that bank was more than all public sector banks combined, because they're badly managed. As a common logic, just take it that government can't do a great job at running businesses. It's not their business also to run businesses. Invariably, they have to be, say, privatized. So why even talk about government banks? Let's go into private banks. Then within that, when you are evaluating stock also, each industry got certain characteristics. You can't take same say set of points that you make a note and then go with the same thing, because each sector has different characteristics. For example, let me just if you go to a IT sector, right, just about starting information technology or a tech company you start, you need capital because you need to invest some into technology, you need to hire people, getting revenue will take time, and breaking even will take time. Where do you get funds from? You have to raise capital. You go to that VCs and PE, that kind of thing. No, because no bank will fund you, because IT business is not based on assets. For bank to give a loan, they ask for a fixed asset as a collateral, and also you need to have a profitability. So you don't become eligible for a bank loan. So what you tend to see is that none of the IT sectors have loans. They are all debt free. It is not just that they are debt. Nobody would have given them debt. And once it breaks even and gets into mode, it doesn't need loan because it turns profit. The nature of business is that you don't need to keep building new buildings or investing, making heavy capital investment. You just have operational expenses. And once your cycle sets in, that you're getting more revenue, from within that you have a profit. So that is funding your growth. So typically, you rarely find a IT company having a debt or loans. And whereas you can't have a manufacturing sector without loans. So if you have to build a factory, it takes time. You also need to probably buy that land. And so there is a cost to that, and it takes time. And post that production start, then you finding market, then you start selling, then eventually money comes back. If you have to do all of that as a equity, it will be like an unviable thing. You don't raise so much equity, but also banks are happy to lend there because they have a physical collateral at least. Okay, you say, okay, my factory is there. We have a 50 acres or 100 acres land. You take that as collateral. Give me 100 crore loan. They'll give that. Then when you're building, you want to buy plant machinery, they'll take it as collateral and give loan. And that is required also. So if that is a well-planned investment, that business will start manufacturing, then they get money, then they make a profit. From that, they make the payments. Similarly, certain say we all very fond of renewable energy, but you can't have a renewable energy company, be it a wind power or solar power, without company having debts. Reason is the nature. How does a solar plant work? Government gives a contract or whatever. You're making a solar plant. The company is supposed to invest whole amount of money upfront. That is, you negotiate and agree on it. You make a power purchase agreement with the government. They say next 20 years per unit cost 2 rupees 70 paise, or at some point it was even 15 rupees. That is there. Then you make your money. Nobody is giving you money to set it up. So the company raises funds based showing that PPA, that will be the future return. So they are to import the equipment, or if there is a local manufacturer, buy that equipment. They are to have pay something for the land, then for equipment, then setting it up. It all takes time. There's a cost of money also in that, and then make it operational. And only when it starts generating power, they start getting money. And it is also not that they spend 1,000 crore and set up a 1 gigawatt plant. They start getting returns on that scale immediately. The payment comes on power usage. So every month they will get some money from the say the department, the power department of the particular state where they are selling that power to. So every month they'll get. So from that, after factoring in some costs, some money will be left, which they will use to say repay that loan. So the revenue is going to come over future 25 years, but the investment needs to be upfront. So there you can't keep raising equity every time you have to set up a new plant. That is where you take loan. So you don't view at every business in the same way of some other sector. So you shouldn't be surprised or shocked and treat it as a bad business if a solar power company has a big debt and two, it is making loss. Yeah, when you set up, buy land and setting up the plant, that year there are only expenses, there's no revenue. And later revenue is coming slowly, getting added. The whole plant may be set up over a period of 2 years, 3 years. So it won't go in one phase. So over 2, 3, 4 years, it may be showing loss. It doesn't matter. So that's where you need to understand the basics of that sector. How does it factor? You then look at that, okay, what is the cost of setting up 1 gigawatt plant or a 500 megawatt plant for this company? How does it compare with its competitors? If it is doing more effectively, spending less money to set it up, they're doing a great job. Then two, do they have a power purchase agreement, or they're just manufacturing power and hoping that somebody will buy that? If there is no PPA, you have to consider a higher risk. If they have a power purchase agreement, then what duration? If it is for 10 years, then there is a risk of your power not getting buyers after 10 years or getting a lower price after 10 years. So whereas if the company has a 25-year power purchase agreement, then that is good. Like that, evaluation factors in each sector are different. A lot of people tend to confuse that. They pick up some lines that loss making means bad, company has debt means bad, this. So they'll end up buying only few typical tech kind of companies which are showing profit. Or on the other hand, sorry, they'll miss out on opportunities on other sectors which probably are giving much faster return. Going by my example, anybody looked at Adani Green last year when we discussed this in this group, and some of you had invested also, it was at 140, 150 rupees. And then it went up to 900 rupees and 1100 rupees within matter of months. So if you, look at that by a standard method that, oh, it has got a big debt, oh, it's making loss, why should we invest? So it is not foolish or a hype that that price went up. There is a fundamental logic. In matter of 1 year, that company has become world's largest renewable energy plant. When you're into a new sunrise sector and making that kind of growth, market or the smart money recognizes and respects that. And now coming back to this IDFC First Bank, so before getting into specific bank, we look at what should you evaluate when you're looking at a bank. As I said, every sector has its own characteristic. What does a bank have? It has liabilities. Liabilities means Somebody needs to mute the mic. If you're not speaking, I'll request everyone to mute your mic so that it doesn't disturb others. Yeah. Okay. Now, in a bank, what happens is for a bank, liabilities are the deposits. We may look at that money is coming in, it's good, it is asset. No, it's other way around for bank. If you, for example, deposit money in a bank, that is a liability for the bank because they have to pay you interest. On the other hand, what are the assets for the bank? Assets are the loans that they give out. Because when they give out loan, so the people or the company, whichever took loan, they'll be paying interest to the bank. So that is the asset for the bank. So you need to
Gagan,
see.
Gagan, you need to mute your mic.
Yeah, thank you. So assets, you need to see what is the quality, type of liabilities, type of assets, what is the growth in that. Then there is also cost of operations. You're getting certain deposit, but it's also there is a cost because you have to set up a bank branch, you have staff, you have operations, salaries, marketing, various costs are there. So how much of cost you have to spend to get those business? Then management quality, especially in finance, this one particular thing is more important than any other factor in that. In every business, management is important, but especially in a finance business, management quality is everything because the whole finance thing is built on trust. Just imagine, think for yourself. If you have to deposit your money or put your money in a fixed deposit or even in a savings account in a bank, you won't want to put it in a bank which you read some news about that it's little shaky or management is not a trustworthy people. You would play 100% safe. Or first time you hear that kind of news, you would want to take out your money and run and go to some other place where it is safer. And two, uh, in any business, any management, the presentation of results, profitability, various things, certain play is possible. Anybody who knows these balance sheets or accounts will understand that certain tweaking is possible. But in a bank or a financial institution, that is much bigger possibility is there. For example, if a bank has a 1 lakh crore assets under management, even as a layman, I can say with the same performance, the same bank can show 1,000 crore profit or also 1,000 crore loss, and neither of them are wrong or illegal. Let me just clarify, because there are certain rules, strict guidelines which are to be followed, which they'll follow, but then there are a lot of gray areas and which are left to say discretion. For example, you take a Vodafone idea. Till date, Vodafone hasn't defaulted or even delayed payment to any of its vendor or on any loan to any of the bank. Never it has delayed that also. So any bank will be right to say, okay, it's a perfect normal asset. There is no need to classify it as NPA. They're perfectly legal, correct, right? And most banks would do that. On the other hand, management which is proactive even sees that, okay, that company is going through certain trouble. There can be some, say, unpleasant surprises in future. So they bring it into their quarterly results and show that though it hasn't delayed any payments, paying perfectly every month, whatever the installments are due, we are putting it under, say, gross NPA kind of thing. We're taking it as a risky asset. We're classifying it accordingly. And somebody more cautious that even starts putting some money against that. That is NPA. When you go to net NPA, it is basically where asset funds have been set aside to cater for eventuality of that loan going bad. So when they do that, that is going to a next level. So you need to be assessing is the management of the quality which is proactively tells us bad news before it happens, or hides all the bad news and keeps giving us good news and showing good profit. And one fine morning we wake up and listen that RBI has locked up that bank because they don't have any assets or it is defaulted big time. So that's where management is much, much more important in a financial thing. Other, of course, is also ability to say execute the plan in a financial sector. So their prior experience in that also comes into play. For example, I as a layman can search on Google, read here, there, and come up with a plan for a fantastic bank, what it can be or what it should be. I'll say I'll do this, 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 this. I mean, nobody, no banker or experienced person can say that that is a wrong plan. That is fantastic. But still, you shouldn't be investing in my bank because I have no proven any track record of doing anything in the financial sector. So compared to that, maybe someone else who has built bank or done certain things, achieved a scale and considered and respected well in the industry, that would be a preferred person to be bet on. Just one example, I would say the legend of HDFC Bank. It wasn't born when it gave a 20x, 30x, 100x returns over a period of time. That is a later. The legend of HDFC Bank was born when Mr. Deepak Parekh walked into or called Aditya Puri over for a coffee. And by that time, Aditya Puri was a big shot in Citibank and asked him that, I mean, I'm planning to set up a first private sector bank in India. I want you to join that. So from a very hotshot position in a global bank, asking somebody at that time, nobody was sure whether private banks will run in India, will they take off? What will be the government regulation controls? Will people trust private banks to put money? All those questions were there. So asking for that. Identifying that right man played out very well for this bank. Similarly, Uday Kotak had a much larger role in growth of Kotak Mahindra Bank. He's a fantastic banker. So that also needs to be factored in. Then one thing I keep talking about is you need to read annual reports before investing in or actually treating that you are well versed with that investment. Read at least previous 2-3 years annual reports. Don't just look at few quarterly financials and do, because quarterly you have some companies make a presentation, but it's more like a average kind of thing, snapshots. Whereas the annual report is much more lengthy. For example, in this IDFC First Bank, last annual report I saw was about 380 odd pages. Of course, a lot of pages in that would be their advertisements, or when I say advertisement, their own, about their role in media, what the chairman is saying, director is saying. They're very important. If you read what a MD is saying, what CEO is saying, you're hearing firsthand what are their thoughts. Then it gives a more details into their products and what each segment is doing, much more breakdown that you don't find in a general financial. That you understand, that is important. And only then you can really get a deep insights into functioning of the company. And then why I said 2-3 years backward into is important is, today you find what the management is saying, then you have to take a bet whether they are implementing that or can their projections be trusted. On the other hand, when I read a 3-year back annual report, see, in the 3 years back, they projected that they are going to be at 3x in terms of revenue and x in profit. Now I have the actual position in front of me. I can see that, but in these 3 years, they have not even gone to 2x, forget 3x. And similarly, instead of profit, they are at a loss. Then I know that this particular management is not able to deliver on the promises that they have made, or to the level that they have made. So then I would give it certain value. I may not immediately write it off, but I'll whatever they are saying, I'll moderate that and then consider that where they are likely to be. On the other hand, if the company is like lived up to what they're saying or exceeding what they're saying, then if they're projecting X growth, I would take it that it will be X or X plus 10% like that. So we need to understand, read the annual report. And within that, in the latest reports, when you see last quarter, this quarter and previous quarter, you know the delivery, what they're doing on the previous projections. So here what I'll do is I'll remove this screen and I'll bring you to the report on what we just compiled on that IDFC First Bank, because here we're taking one stock as an example to see how to do a little deep dive and learn in more detail about any company before investing. Now I'll share another different screen. Okay, this is not some secret document. I pulled it out from the latest quarter, September quarter results published by the IDFC First Bank. I would have gone for the annual report and then have to compare that. They actually made it easy. I did check out the report in this bank was formed in December 2018. It is just 2.5 years back. So what I did is that picked up what did they plan or what did they announce their intent to do when they formed the bank in December 18. Now we had 19, 20 and about a half a year of 21. In this period, you will also appreciate almost more than 1.5 years has been this, say, COVID and pandemic, because of which there would be certain challenges. Every company faced that in some periods. Some periods were a strict lockdown and all. Even considering that, I want to see how they are performing. Firstly, is their idea right what they wanted to do? Okay, here then I need to start with the background. How was this IDFC First Bank was formed as? There were two companies. One was the IDFC, that is the Investment Development Finance Corporation, which is an old one. So as the name suggests, their role itself was to fund in infrastructure development. So their whole asset book was infrastructure, big loans, that is corporate loans or a wholesale financing as it's called. Then you had a company called Capital First. That was something where Mr. Vaidyanathan was there. Vaidyanathan, for your background, is he's the one who started and headed the say retail loans in ICICI Bank, which grew phenomenally well. So everybody in the industry knew what he was doing and respected that ability to grow retail loan. And I'll discuss why retail loan is important and what is the factors of wholesale and retail. And then post that, he was the CEO heading the ICICI Prudential Insurance Bank. So he has a long history in financial industry and scaled both. ICICI Prudential also grew to be the biggest in that sector for many years. Then he left and joined a company which took a management control over that Capital First. It was into retail lending, and it was based on leveraging technology to giving small loans, even something like 5,000 to 30,000 range. And they were able to scale that up. But at some point, what happens is Capital First, Mr. Vaidyanathan felt bank has a source of funds which are of lower cost, whereas a finance company can't get funds at that cost. So even if you're earning more money, your cost of funds is more, you make very less profit. So having a bank was his ambition. Similarly, IDFC got a bank license, but their whole asset book and play till then was say infrastructure and corporate assets. They wanted to grow in the retail sector. So both these entities merged, and that became IDFC First Bank. So when it reached, Mr. Vaidyanathan has been given the executive role. He's the MD and CEO. He's told, so he's the one who will be running the bank. So he clearly wanted this IDFC First Bank to be a retail bank. Now let me clarify retail and wholesale. Nature of it is, even say IDFC Bank raises money to lend. So how do they do that? They also raise money from corporates. Corporates make deposit. So big amounts are deposited. In that, the risk is, imagine you and me go to deposit in a bank. They will offer us the lowest interest rate possible because we don't have much choice and our amount is not too big. So if, for example, if they offer 8% to us on a fixed deposit or a 7% on a fixed deposit, when a company negotiates with them, instead of 7, they may offer them 9% because we are probably depositing few lakhs. That company may be talking of giving a deposit of 100 crore or 500 crore. So the bank or the finance company gets a much larger funds, but at a high cost. So the more money you have coming from as a corporate deposits, it scales up faster, but comes at a high cost. Whereas individuals putting money into their savings account, how much do you get? You get 4% on your savings account. And if a company is having a current account in that bank, how much return the company get for that current account? 0. Banks don't pay interest for the current account. So what is considered as a good or a great bank performance is if you have more, what the term they use, CASA, CASA. You can see in this also. CASA is current account, savings account. If the percentage of your CASA deposits is more compared as a part of your overall deposits, then that means you are getting funds at a lower cost. The more the CASA, better bank it is considered. So HDFC Bank was one of the pioneers in that, growing that retail business. So they could get banks at a lower cost. And on the other side, now let's go to lending. If you and me need a loan from a bank, they may give it at 14%, 13%. But imagine Reliance needs a loan. Will they pay 13%, 14%? No bank will go even quote more than 9%. And then probably Motabai will squeeze their arm and bring it down to 8%. So imagine for high or wholesale borrowing and lending, they get funds at a high cost, and then they make, they are to give it loans at low cost. The margin is very little. That is between their fund cost and what they are getting by deploying that funds, margin is very little. So if that is more in the retail, so he made it a retail bank. So in this column, you can see December 18, at the time of merger, what is the status? And then he has given a guidance, what he wants to achieve in 5 years. That is by end of financial year 24-25. He said CET and capital adequacy ratio, these are pretty basic. We wanted 12.5 and 13, which itself is more than the mandated by RBI. But what they are standing today at the point is 14.85 and 15, which is a healthy. That is that shows that bank is not at risk of default. They have more than adequate reserves. Now coming to CASA deposits, they were at 5,200 crore when the bank was formed. Now they are at 46,280 crore. So almost in these 2.5 years, the CASA deposits have grown 10 times, which is phenomenal growth. And even in terms of percentage, at the merger, it was less than 9%, 8.68% to be precise. They made a target that in 5 years, that is by end of financial year 24-25, they should grow it to 30% CASA ratio, which itself is a very ambitious target. A lot of older banks and larger banks have been trying to grow their CASA deposit, but with a limited success. And where are they now? They're already at 51%. 2 years ahead of the schedule, they made the target. They eventually plan to go to 50%, but they hope that they'll go to 30% within 5-year period. So in 3 years, less than 3 years, they're crossed 50%. This is a phenomenon. Just for your understanding and comparison, I can think of only one bank which got a substantially higher CASA than that. That is Kotak Mahindra Bank. I think they have 58-59%. HDFC Bank usually averages between 46%. Now in this COVID, probably that has increased a bit. They are around 50%. So to my knowledge, only I say Kotak Mahindra Bank in the whole banking industry got more CASA than this. So it should give us a confidence that they're in the right direction, not just in right direction, they're moving at a fantastic pace and well in way to achieve what they promise. Next, you go to a number of branches. They decided in 5 years they should have 800 to 900 branches. And in this 2.5 years, in spite of 1.5 year being in lockdown or COVID condition, they're already at 600 branches. And customer deposit at less than 5 crore. That is, when the bank was formed, it was at 31%. What that means is 69% of their loans, that is nearly 70% of the deposit that the bank had, were high net worth individuals or corporates. That is, each deposit is more than 5 crore. So they wanted to increase that share of small deposits to 80% in 5 years' time. Why that is important, I told you. You have big deposits coming in. If few big depositors withdraw their money, banks' funds will go for a toss. I mean, they'll need to be seriously running around to bridge that gap. If 5 banks withdraw 500 crore each, 2,500 crore gone out of window. So the risk becomes more. That is the reason. It's not that money is bad. They would keep that money which isn't coming in. Also, we said higher amounts would come at a higher interest cost to the bank, whereas the small deposits will have a very nominal or a small interest rate. So they intended to in 5 years go to 81%. They're already at, I mean, they wanted to go to 80%, they're at 81%. That they've achieved the target in 2.5 years. In the previous bank formation, top 20 depositors had 40% of the deposit, which is a huge risk. 20 means if 5 deposits left, 10% of your bank deposits are walked out of the bank. It can happen overnight. So they wanted to bring it to 5% within 5 years. So now they are able to bring it to 9%. From 40 to 9 is a fantastic performance, and they will 100% achieve this. In doing this, I'm not just talking of this bank's achievement. It could even be like not achieved. Even then, when you do this comparison, you know that what is the bank's plan and are they achieving it or are they not achieving? So in this case, it happens to be doing good. It could well be that other stock we are assessing may be doing badly on these parameters. That tells us that don't trust what they're projecting. Give certain discount to whatever they're projecting and value accordingly. And also, or you, if it is so bad, you may say, okay, this is bank is not worth investing because of these factors. The certificate of deposit, again, corporate deposit at high interest rate. From 22,000 crore, they brought it down to 6,000. It can't immediately become zero because some of them have a condition where they can't foreclose. The investor can foreclose, but a bank can't close out. That's why they would be holding it till the maturity, but they won't renew it. So that will eventually come down to very little or. If that is the liability side of it, the assets is the how, to whom are you lending? So in that retail assets were 36,000 crore when the bank was formed. That is all come from Capital First because when they merged that, IDFC didn't have any retail assets, but it was at 36,000. And how much they wanted to reach 1 lakh crore in 5 years time. Where are they now? They are at 78,000 crore. So they need to do 22,000 crore as a retail assets within over next 2.5 years. So if they have more than doubled in this 2.5 years, I'm sure they can double from here in 2.5 years. So where it will take it to probably 1.25 or 1.5 lakh crores in retail asset, which is they're well on course or doing better than that. Retail assets as a percentage of overall asset, that is overall loans, out of which how many are you given as retail? Why that is important is, if you start giving corporate loans, big amounts, your book grows faster. You can say, oh, we had last year 50,000 crore, this year we come to 1 lakh crore because we have given out 50,000 crore. That 50,000 crore incremental loans could have been between 5 corporates or 5 infrastructure projects. Some highway project you give 10,000 crore, some real estate you give another 10,000, like that. It is easier to grow that way, but they come at a higher risk. Out of those 5, if one fall becomes NPA, you have a huge hit on your NPS will shoot up, your profits is gone, you're in big time trouble. Whereas if the same 50,000 crore comes through growth in individual loans to small individuals, small loans, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 rupees, or to you and me like 1 lakh, 2 lakh rupees. These loans, very few get bad. Some individuals may get, because even individuals don't want to default on such small amounts. If if our assets are say 2 crore, 5 crore, there's a more chance of we defaulting at 50 crore, we try to do something. But if we have a loan of 50,000 or 1 lakh, we won't default on that. Nobody wants a bank calling for that amount or somebody visiting and following up and you being treated as a defaulter for a small amount. So the tendency is that these loans get repaid. So defaults become lesser. So the more retail assets, the more safer for the bank. So they are well on their course to do that, and they're growing at a fantastic pace. Other thing I liked about is the wholesale. There are 2 ways how you increase the retail loan portfolio. One is give more retail loans, and don't give any additional wholesale loans. Then also percentages increase. Here in this case, they had 56,000 crore as a wholesale loan. They intended to bring it below 40,000. That is their plan, actually reducing that. Reducing that is reducing one's business, reducing their revenue. But they have actually brought it down to 31,000 crores. So they are going faster than what they intend to do in 5 years, within 2.5 years. What this means is, I mean, anybody who is in business would know nobody wants to say shut down what they are doing. Something is giving revenue, even if it is not the best. I mean, if I were in their place, I would have thought, let us retain this 56,000 crores slowly and let us increase the retail part of it. So anyway, in terms of ratios, it will even out over a period of time. But here they're proactively closing down those loans. So now their whole wholesale loans itself has come down to only 31,000. And within that, the most risky part of loans is infrastructure loan, which they've brought down from 22,000 crores to 10,000 crore. And they want to make it nil in 5 years' time. I don't see why they can't, because they made it to reduced it by 12,000 crores in 2.5 years. They have another 2.5 years to make it to say zero. So like this, rest of it are provision coverage and cost to. One important factor is net interest margin. The whole banking business is around this net interest margin. What that means is banks borrow money from somewhere. When I say borrow, they accept deposits or people put money in the bank for which they pay the interest rate. And then they lend it to somewhere. The difference between the cost of at which I'm getting loan funds and cost at which I'm giving loans, that difference is the net interest margin. So the logical is, if the net interest margin is higher, then the bank will make more profit, because that is the revenue for the bank. Deposits are not revenue for the bank. Loans are not revenue for the bank. The revenue is, of course, the interest that you get. Then your expense is that interest you are paying. The difference between it shows your efficiency, how well you're doing, and how well you're likely to do in future. So at the time of merger, the net interest margin of this company was at 3.10. At that time, IDFC, though it's not included in this, is if you looked at only IDFC, their net interest margin was 1.4 or 1.5%. And this people Capital First at 7-8%. So on an average total combined, it came to 3.1%. So they plan to make it to 5 to 5.5% net interest margin, which is very, very, very ambitious. Why I'm saying that 3 times or emphasizing that part is, you should be aware the net interest margin of HDFC Bank, supposed to be the finest private sector bank, it is usually around 4.3%. In a good season, it may go to 4.4, 4.5%. Nobody has this, none of the leading banks has this kind of net interest margin. And this Mr. Vaidyanathan, in his guidance in the interview, says that they're looking, they can take it up to 8 to 9%. That is insane margin. How they're able to do that? Because they have been able to increase the CASA ratio like anything from 10-12%, they got it to 51%. And so CASA is, you're getting deposits at 4% or 0% in CASA, net very low. And 2, instead of giving to corporates where they would be able to charge only 9%, 8%, 10%, they're giving retail loans. Individual loans, they'll be charging 4%, 14%, 15%. In some cases, it would go up to 18%. So what does that do? You have a margin almost 15-16%. Sorry, my fault. 9 to 10% margin would be there. But now, as they also have certain wholesale assets, the average is coming to 5.5%. Now it is 5.76%, way more than what they targeted in 5-year period. This is, these are the things you need to read to understand whether this bank is worth investing in or not. Because when you have these basics right, the profit is just a figure. It will happen eventually next month, the month after that, or like that in future, the next quarter or the quarter after that. because you need, what won't change is these parameters, the groundwork that is being laid. You need to study this. So you see a bank with 5.5%, in this case 5.76% net interest margin, that bank will do miracles in terms of profitability. If it takes it to 7-8%, their profitability will be nearly double of HDFC Bank. And this is net interest margin from where money is there. The bank is getting a certain revenue. Then there is an additional cost, which is expenses. What are your expenses to do that? In their case, the expenses were around 70-80%. They needed to bring down. Now, as they're setting up new branches, initially percentage of say cost expenses will be little higher, but it is also well on track to get into the planned percentages. So now, like this, we can keep going on and on.
Rajendra, can I interrupt you for a second?
Please.
See,
may know who is
yeah,
speaking. So
I am Virendra Mohan here, Lima 76.
yeah.
So
please.
I just if you look at your when you were looking at their one thing that stands out is that they have projected GNPAs and net NPAs as more.
Right.
It should not be a case, and even in the achievement they are more. So this is one flag which it raises that then the gross NPAs and net NPAs are increasing. And second is the coverage ratio. So these are two flags, if you can explain, as to they are an aberration in the whole sheet that you're shown, because in the all other parameters they are matching. So if they're increasing CASA ratio, they increases branches. So it is validating somewhere or the other. But if you could just explain this GNPAs and net NPAs and their coverage ratio, why have they projected it as more, which should be less? Or
Okay,
maybe
yeah, I got your point, and fantastic. I'm so glad that you asked. That shows that you have been paying attention and understood the whole thing. And that's a very important part also. In the end, bank's performance, the biggest red flag or a green flag comes under their NPAs. So in this case, what has happened is you need to pick up their March 20 quarter results. Okay, why March 20 is important is that is pre-COVID. So by then the bank has done only 5 quarters after being formed. That is all of 19 and 21 quarter. In that, if you see the gross NPAs and net NPAs, within that 1.5 years, they had come down to around 2.4%, because now I'm not opening all the reports and showing about 2.5%, and the net NPAs had come to 1.4%, well on way to achieve their targets within a 2.5 year period. But of course, this COVID has its own challenge, and it has been a challenge to all the institutions. That's where even RBI has given a moratorium on interest payment for 6 months. And so that has impacted the retail side also. NPAs have increased. But if you see the in the current year, March quarterly report to say June's quarterly report to September, maximum NPAs were in March. They reduced a bit in June. In September quarter, there has been a further substantial reduction in the NPAs, gross as well as net. And here again, as I said, a bank can do few things. They can show more in the risk side, and they can show less also. So here again, the bank has been proactive in catering for and showing maximum what they see as a risk, rather than trying to hide it or brush it under the carpet. So you need to see this previous quarter NPAs gross as well as net. Then you will understand clearly that the spike or increase, which is red flag, definitely, as you said, is happened, and then it is also showing already decline. And in the guidance for future, they mentioned that their collections now have already gone better than pre-COVID level. So after this 1.5 year of disturbance, the collections are at par with below that. And similarly, in the NPAs, if you read just the figures, the top 9 numbers. If you read the breakup and all of that, there are some even infrastructure side, some events which they showed as they are turned to NPA. For example, there are 2-3 tall companies. So where it is a functional tall highways, But because there was a lockdown or a limited movement permitted, so naturally no vehicles were moving, they weren't getting revenue. So the companies which were paying them regularly without fail were not able to make payments, so they turned to that. So the 1,000 crore almost was put in as a default and amount accounted for in this period. But they also explained that once the traffic movement becomes normal, then the banks, they would be paying, and eventually that money which they took as a hit in NPA will add to the profits. That amount will come back. Similarly, they have treated all that Vodafone 2,000 crore funded asset and there is the gross NPA. If now you are aware, Vodafone is in the process of negotiating settlement. They got a government side big relief. And once the funding happens and that is streamlined, then they can take that off from the NPA thing. Similarly, they have also written off about 450 or 465 crores on that account also. That will also get added to the profit. So this is a company which is doing things proactively, not the minimum that they are required to. There's no need to write off anything on Vodafone account because they never delayed any payment. I hope I was able to answer your question. But it's a very important factor you mentioned that needs to be looked at.
No, Rajendra, as you speak, I think probably I also get a hint as to why. See, in their guidance, they're showing more GNPAs and net NPAs. Why would a banker, instead of showing in my 5 years or 10 years target, I will reduce gross NPA, why will he show more percentage? Probably one answer, what weak is the truthfulness, that they understand the business that IDFC was, the kind of corporate loans that they had, and the kind of defaults they expect. If you see the guidance, yeah. If you see assets, last two lines, gross NPA from 1.95.
Okay, okay. You're comparing with when the bank was formed to where it is going to be, right?
Yeah. Why are they expecting it to be more? A good bank will say, I'll reduce it. They are probably they know the health of the, maybe if I don't know whether I'm right or maybe they know the health of the IDFC, the kind of corporate loans they have and likely defaults. So they have projected it so. Maybe that is the answer. I don't know if you can.
No, I think now
Rajendra, one more thing.
Part of the question. Let me first complete that, Abhishek. Yeah, I'll just
Rajendra, this might be relevant in the similar question. This is Ashish. Okay, so I have recently joined this group, right? But I was listening to this, so there might be a correlation between why they are mentioning higher GNPAs and net NPAs linked to the way they are projecting their business. See, to get a very high net interest income, right? CASA ratio will only allow you a lower cost of funds, right? But lending, right, is the other part which adds to the higher net interest income. What it seems to me, I don't have a detail of it, but it seems to me when the borrower is a bigger account, right? Obviously, the interest rate negotiated is much higher. You cannot expect corporates to give you 12 and 14% loans today, whether they are infrastructure loans, whether they are working capital loans or anything, right? No corporate will do that today. Those can come only from small borrowers. Now, inherently, when you shift your lending to small borrowers, while you reduce the risk of one single borrower going bad, but the delinquency rate starts going up. Right? Because you need an infrastructure to recover those loans. And that probably is one of the reasons that the net NPA and GNPA will go up, will keep going up. It's not necessarily that the big corporates will come into this. Suppose you have given a lot of two-wheeler loans, right? Two-wheeler loans typically will have a tenure of 24 months, right? 3-month default by one guy, it has to be put under NPA. Right? But yes, those loans, the ones, or the new small enterprises which are coming out of the COVID and are needing certain working capital loans, today are borrowing at a phenomenal rate, right? Just to restart or kickstart their business again. Right? So I think that's this thing, that as the shift towards higher net interest income, which you mentioned that it's insane to have 7 to 8%, it is true. Right, but the risk the bank is taking to make sure that that happens, right, will inherently have changes in some of these ratios.
Okay, yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Thank you for that input. Yeah, one here it is, what the experience has shown is that when the loan size gets lower, the risk doesn't increase. It has been seen to be other way around. When a smaller loans, the net, say, defaults are much lower. In terms of number of defaults may be more, but the amounts and percentages is low.
Bandhan Bank is exactly opposite, Rajendra. Bandhan Bank has only given loans to small people. See, small loans have a very different way of collecting, and the only successful bank doing that small loans is being the Grameen Bank of Bangladesh. Right.
I mean, that's a entirely separate discussion. What we can
I
say,
understand, but I'm saying smaller loans. In India,
microfinance is a different ballgame.
no, not microfinance. In India, about 10 years ago, in 2008, HSBC had started this, which was called Pragati, right? Lot of non-collateral small loans being given, right? And they had to wind it down over 6 years because they could not collect more than 50% of it. So there has to be a very, very good infrastructure and their way of recovery mechanism to do this. On paper, it looks good. There is no doubt about it. But you know, the end result matters. What is your recovery mechanism?
Right. Okay. Let me answer this specific to IDFC First Bank.
Okay.
The GNPA and NPA that at the merger you're saying is that is the Capital First record. That is the GNPA NPA they had. And as far as IDFC was concerned, they weren't showing any bad debts in that, because by the time this infrastructure crisis or loan default have not happened, and so they're putting it that way. So, but any serious banker would know that that can't be the way forward. There will be some defaults, there will be NPAs. So, realistic target. There's no bank with less than this. So they put a more realistic. It's not that they want to increase it. They know there are already stressed assets which have not been classified. When they merged and Mr. Vaidyanathan took over, he can't do backlogging thing that you change what you are reporting in past. He needs to start where it was, but then realistically put that in the infrastructure loan, this much may be default, and then overall industry average, this much will be there. Even if we do better than that, we'll still have this kind of NPS. That, okay, I didn't understand that part of a question, why they increase their expectation, because it's more realistic. You can't have this percent of things.
So it's the Rajendra point taken, because it may be their due diligence and their experience, which I have said. This is what industry norms. So probably now it is understood. Thank you. Thank you.
Right. And what I tried to explain is why it is now high and not in line with what they were expecting. That will happen eventually over next few quarters. Okay. And now just to give some from this, what have we learned? We've seen the metrics and all. Then whenever you're buying, no, some people tend to get confused about book value is 1 rupee, 10 rupees. Should this price be book? Or the face value of share is 1 rupee or 10 rupees. What should be the share price? The face value has no bearing on the share price. It can be anything. What you need to see is the total market capitalization. So some companies have less number of shares. So at the same value of business, somebody needs to mute. So somebody having a, say, for example, for a X business, same value of business, if you have 1 crore shares, the value share price may be 100 rupees. Whereas with the same business, if you have 1,000 crores, the share price will be 1/10 of that. So you can't compare that this is cheaper or that is cheaper. What you need to look at is market capitalization, what you need to get. Now, this is the summary figures of where the banks today stands today. Okay. Gross funded assets, the loans are about 1 lakh crore, surrounding 1,17,000. And the deposits are there adequately to cater to that kind of growth. And CASA ratio is about 50%. Now, if I look, what is this bank going forward? What will it be worth? When I'm investing, I'm not doing a mathematical calculation of today. I'm interested, where will this bank be in, say, 10 years or 9 years? So let's, for ease of understanding, by 2030, where can this bank reach? Only if I'm excited by that, I might commit some money to invest in that, or I will find some other stock. So in this case, for example, if they're able to grow their loan book at 24% from where they are, which they've shown they have done much faster than that, because from
Anar, I
Yeah.
think JP Paul's mic is on. Paul needs to switch off his mic. Is it Jenny Paul?
Yeah, Paul or I think
Hmm.
Babu, one of the two has to put it off.
Yeah, I think they've done that now. Thank you. Thanks. Because I have to see the screen, I'm not able to see all that. Oh, okay. I was saying they're able to grow, and if you take a estimate that they'll grow at, for example, 24% asset book over a period of year, that means this 1 lakh crore, it will start doubling every 24 means every 3 years. So if you take next 9 years, that will become 2 lakh crore, 4 lakh, and about 8 lakh crore as the funded assets. So on 8 lakh crore, if they are able to take that net interest margin to say 6%, they're already at 5.75%, keep it conservative at 6%. On 8 lakh crore, 6% would be like a 48,000 crore. Then add the cost of operation something, if it stabilizes to 50%, which is still more than industry average, if the costs are at that time, they would have a EBITDA of around, that makes it to 24,000 crores. Then if they're at 24,000 crore EBITDA, the valuation should be, you give a decent multiple of 20, which is generally, you can see in any of the leading bank, then the bank would be worth 24,000 into 20. We're talking about 48,000 crore as the valuation of, sorry, 4,80,000 crore as the valuation of the bank by 2030. On the other hand, if they are not able to grow at 24% and they grow at 18%, then they'll double that every 4 years. Then it will come to about 5 lakh crore as the funded assets, and at 6% net interest margin, they have say 30,000 crore, and on that 50% expenses will still be 15,000 crore. You put 20 times that multiple, you're talking about a market capitalization of about 3 lakh crore. So where is the bank stands today? Its market capitalization is around 31,000 crore. So I'm looking at that on a conservative basis. By 2030, they can grow 10x. And if they do better than that, it can be better. So this meets my personal criteria to invest in a cap that in 10 years, definitely it should go to 10x. Last year I was talking of it should grow. I mean, any company we are investing in should grow 10x in 5 years. That was because market is at half the price. And then we know that the rebound was bound to happen. So even say easing that, so I expect that this bank would grow 10x by 2030. I'm putting a figure. So don't take it as a guidance for you to invest in this, but that is how I would evaluate. Is this bank worth putting money in or not? So it meets the quality of management, and it is doing well on projected. Its path is right. They're looking to grow the retail side of business. The credit first, from where it has come, they have the technology. I mean, Mr. Ashish brought in a good point. If you just start lending money to whoever comes by, eventually there'll be a lot of defaults. Whereas in this case, they have algorithms and AI-enabled things to identify result. How Bajaj Finance does very well is that they have this kind of data and analytical tools to identify who is likely to default or who will repay. So at an instant, they are able to sanction loans in the store itself for consumer finance. So this company has that kind of tech backup and also experience where they were able to keep their net NPS below 1%. So as this retail loans grow here, we expect that NPS to come down to around 1.5% at net level, which is good. In that, I think conservatively, I would expect the bank to have a market cap of about 3 lakh crore. So a lot of people tend to think, why don't we invest in HDFC only if it is good, we know tested. Whereas some other company that we are talking about is may do a lot of things, a lot of may, it may grow kind of. The difference is that HDFC Bank today, if you are to buy that, it costs you about 8 lakh or 8.5 lakh crore rupees. Whereas this bank is available for 30,000 crore. So will HDFC not grow? It will grow from 8 lakh crore. It will go to 12 lakh crore or 15 lakh crore. But it won't go to 80 lakh crore in this same period of time. So that is 10x return. You are looking at returns or your investment. It is not which bank is big, or we're not looking for a gold medal, silver medal, and like that. On the other hand, as I said, first part of your stock selection is your objective. If you're a retiree, you have some funds, you want to keep that money safe and give a decent return. You're not looking for, outstanding returns. You're not looking for wealth creation in that. Rather, you don't want to lose that money, and you should get little more than what bank is giving you as FD. In that case, you blindly close your eyes, put your money in, you buy shares of HDFC Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank, absolutely risk-free. You'll have some growth. If you have more aggressive objective than that, you're looking for wealth creation and want to grow faster than that, you don't really need this money to survive or to meet your immediate needs, then you look for which can give a faster, much faster growth compared to the leaders like a Kotak or HDFC Bank. Then you put this. I just ran you through the thought process and what I looked at and what I would look at and how I would calculate what return I can expect from this bank. All of that may go wrong, but at least you know what you're doing and why you're doing that. I think I have spoken too much. I'll be very happy to take any questions anybody has.
Nothing much, Rajinder, but one thing that I must admit and say, I'm attending this for the first time. What the way you took it through is today a job being done by lots and lots of people who would be pursuing professional analyst as a job profile. Right? I, by
Do you
virtue
have
of
an offer for me?
that's the only difference. They are all already investors in my company. Correct. So dealing with them day in, day out is my job. Right. So I only can ask investors to invest in my company, but not offer jobs of analysts to those companies. But it is really, really good. I thought about it, and then I said what you were saying and mentioning is absolutely. The only thing which I said, as you said, it may not be a 0-1 situation. Right? So times to begin with, it's always to have some mix of ratio. Right? Be little more on the safer side and put little risk, little one. As you gain confidence over the years, keep shifting it.
Absolutely.
That's the one, because you will never get it perfect, right? And you should not even aspire to get it perfect. It is just that the probability of times that you get it right versus the wrong, if that is on the higher side, you are home and dry.
And absolutely, and it is also never a fire and forget kind of thing.
Absolutely.
You need to be reviewing it every quarter. See,
Absolutely.
are they in the line which they promised, or they're going in right line?
Yeah.
And then take action. And in between, if some negative news pops up, then you make immediate decision to exit or buy more kind of thing. Continuous progress is required.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a thing which you need to be highly involved in. It is not something that you can just let it off and say, like a provident fund that you see it only after 30 years. Yeah. Very good.
Hi, Kalra here.
Hi, Kalra, how are you? Please go.
I just want to add one thing. One very experienced gentleman had once told me that he goes to the mall to see what the people are putting into the shopping bag. The next thing he sees is what kind of advertisements are being done. So Mr. Amitabh Bachchan is doing advertisement for IDFC First now. So that should give us some more confidence.
See, I think, Kalra, just one thing. Mr. Bachchan would do advertisement what suits him. He may not really have the thing of saying, how does this meet our need? And there are companies for which he has advertised, and those have gone bankrupt also.
Okay, that was on the lighter side. We can
I agree.
draw our own conclusions.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that what Rajinder said, I think, is the most apt one, right? See through it, think about it, and put the quantum of risk that you want to take. And that's the bottom line. I think what I was pretty, this thing was that the amount of work that he has done on IDFC Bank. That's what I was saying. There are a lot of information which he did share with her, because It just coincidentally happened, Rajinder, that I had been also tracking IDFC, and this thing right from the time the merger of First Finance and IDFC happened. IDFC was an financing company, industrial financing company, and First was a consumer loan company. Correct. So when that merger happened, since then, so before this guy Vaidyanathan, the person who was looking after these loans in IDFC, was a friend of mine. In that merger, he lost his job. That was the downside. But I had been tracking it. Correct. That is why I was asking those, that the way they are changing and these, right? And all these, small cap banks, as we call them, from a banking perspective, they're all small cap as of now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah. Anyone else, anything before we wind up?
Thank you, Rajendra. That was a great presentation and very in-depth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Rajinder. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you all. We'll take leave here. Thank you for joining on a Sunday morning.
Thank you, sir. It was really good. Thank you.